In Unit 11.3, we'll be discussing whether or not intelligence tests actually work. To answer this question, we must examine reliability and validity first. So reliability is the extent to which a test yields consistent results. It's assessed by a consistency of scores on two halves of the test, alternate forms of the test, or retesting. All right. If the test yields really weird results, if the bell curve, instead of looking like this, it looks like this, the test is probably not very reliable. All right. Validity is a little bit different. Validity is the extent to which a test measures or predicts what it is supposed to predict. If you're taking an English language arts test, and then when you sit down to take it, it's a bunch of geometry questions, is that really a valid assessment of what you've learned in English? No, they're math questions, so that would be invalid. Content validity is the type of validity that tests the extent to which a test samples the behavior that is of interest. So, for example, if you want to assess your driving abilities, then you would take a driving test. You could probably assess for driving abilities if you took a written exam, but the content validity would not be as valid if you were to actually drive a car. All right. Criterion is behavior that a test is designed to predict. All right. So, like a final exam, the criterion for the final exam is designed to test your knowledge in a content area. The criterion for an SAT is to predict your future aptitude for college success. The measure used in defining whether the test is predictively valid, that is the criterion. Predictive validity is said to be obtained when a test predicts the behavior it is designed to predict. Okay? We're not making sure that the test is testing for what it's supposed to test for. We're making sure that the test predicts what it's supposed to predict. So if an SAT or ACT exam is supposed to predict college readiness and future college success, then if you score well on the ACT and you do terrible in college, then that particular ACT has very low predictive validity. It's assessed by computing the correlation between test scores and the criterion behavior. It's also called criterion-related validity. Now, recent research has shown us that intelligence is relatively stable from early childhood on. IQ scores tend to be fairly stable as well. However, the closer together in time that an IQ tests are given, the more consistent or stable the scores will be. As you see here, the child who takes the IQ test at the same age has a closer score on the two different tests than the other two children. The changes that are seen here are likely due to random variation, alertness at the time of test, his or her knowledge of specific items of the test, etc. Scores tend to increase in children who view academic achievement as important. Scores tend to increase in children whose parents take an interest in their academic success and whose parents have firm but moderate disciplinary procedures. Think authoritative parents versus authoritarian. Scores tend to decrease in children who view academic achievement as unimportant. And scores tend to decrease in children whose parents are very stern, are very lax, and who show little interest in their academic success. Think hands-off or authoritarian. So back to our original question, do test scores really measure intelligence? Well, this is a question of validity, isn't it? Does the test measure what it claims to measure? That's an issue of validity. Most test developers argue that their tests are valid measures of intelligence by showing that test scores are related to children's grades in school. But are children's grades in school a reflection of their true intelligence? Consider what we've discussed so far, what we've gone over so far in these flip videos, and we are going to have this discussion in class. So once again, to reiterate with the normal distribution curve, about 68% of the population falls within one standard deviation of the average. This is 68% of people score within 15 points above or below 100, which, if you remember from last unit, is the standard. That is the average IQ score. And then two standard deviations from the mean is 96% of the population. They score about 30 points, either above or below the average. But have you ever heard anyone say, hey, I'm in the top 95th percentile? Well, what does that mean? To put things into that context or to frame your ranking in that way, what does it mean in the 95th percentile? Well, if you're in the 95th percentile, then that means 95% of your classmates are below you. So you're in the top 5% if you're in the 95th percentile. All right, if you need clarity on that, we'll talk about it in class. So getting smarter. And we're going to watch a video on this in class as well. This is called the Flynn Effect. The Flynn Effect is a concept of modernization. It's the rising average intelligence that we see in test performances. For example, if you look at the average person back in the 1920s, as you can see here, and then compare them, do a cross-sectional study if you could, with someone of the same age in the 1990s, you'll see that intelligence has significantly gone up. Why is this? This is known as the Flynn Effect. It's what seems to be this tendency for intelligence to increase as education becomes more available to everyone, as societies and other third world countries continue to develop and become second, first world countries. We see this growing rate of intelligence. What do you think is the cause of this rising, this increase in IQ scores?